Welcome everybody. My name is David Hart. I'm the director of the Mitchell Center. It's great to have you here today and to have a wonderful speaker with us who I'll introduce in a minute. Just a reminder that more good stuff coming up. We had a great environmental law talk last Monday with Dave Owen, and today another one, and then we'll head off into some other parts of the sustainability puzzle. John Kramer will be here from the thing that the short version is called SUSINC, and the long version is the National Socio-Environmental Synthesis Center. This is this $25 million investment that NSF has made because they thought what we did in Maine was so wonderful with the Sustainability Solutions Initiative. They wanted to do a version down close to the Beltway. So John is a co-leader of that program, particularly kind of heads up a lot of the work on interdisciplinarity, and I'm looking at Caroline because I just discovered when Dave Owen was here last week that you guys are co-authors on a paper studying interdisciplinarity from environmental law perspective, and John will come in where they're deeply interested in our work, but they're also doing a lot of interesting work themselves on how you create these interdisciplinary teams to go out and get stuff done. And it's a very different experiment than ours, so we're watching. Kathleen and Brian McGill have had a grant down there and gone back and forth a lot, and so they're real experts in what's up in Annapolis. And then the following week, Robin Alden is here. Robin's an amazing person herself. She was the Commissioner of Marine Resources in Maine and is now leading this fascinating NGO, the Penobscot East Resource Center, and very interested in collaborative opportunities with folks here. So she'll be up and around, and we'll get word out about that if you'd like to meet with either of those folks. I think you'd find both of them very interesting. Come to think of it, John is also I guess chairing the advisory board for our Safe Beaches and Shellfish Beds project that's part of NEST. So that's it for, I just have to get out of this and switch over. Okay, so I had the pleasure of meeting Jon Devine for the first time in January when I was down in DC doing a lot of work with our congressional delegation on some policy issues. And for me, he's a perfect example of what I think we aspire to do in various ways, which is to kind of get closer and closer to the world of action. When we talk about linking knowledge with action, you can look at people like Jon Devine and see what that really looks like. Sometimes we tend to stay on our little island in the middle of the Penobscot River and not sure what action is all about, but you'll hear a lot about that today. He leads the Clean Water Solutions team at the Natural Resources Defense Council, one of the leading environmental NGOs in the world. It's been around 71?
1970.
70, okay. So very much born at the time of Earth Day and all of those important moments in the history of environmental movement. He has a lot of expertise and interest that's relevant to work we do, and well beyond that, certainly an expert in stormwater pollution and what you do to mitigate that, things like green infrastructure. But he's worked on a bunch of other things, continues to, these industrial livestock operations, sometimes called CAFOs, or concentrated agricultural feeding operations, the mountaintop removal related to the coal industry. He's not from Maine, but he's close. His father and aunt and uncle all went here to this school. He went to another school in Maine. I forget if it's one of the community colleges or something. Is it Bowdoin? Oh no, Kathleen, it's Bowdoin College, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of Bowdoin grads here, and they're all smarter than me. I'm sorry to say. Yeah. So he, one of the fascinating things about his story that I just heard was that I think before his junior year, he went off to Kent Island, which is just south of Grand Manan, and it's where all field biologists should go to get a taste of what it means to do biology in a beautiful place. And although that didn't turn out to be his exact path to grow up to be a field biologist, we're probably better off for it because he found his way to the world of environmental law. He did his a law degree at an institution that he shares with Senator Mitchell, a law degree from Georgetown. And in fact, I was reading a little bit about his background, and he has stories that are just like George Mitchell's, which Senator Mitchell talked about about a month ago when he was here, about growing up on the banks of the Kennebec River and how polluted it was and how that influenced his own thinking. And Jon has stories like that. He has a wonderful, I don't know if you call this officially a blog, but he writes for Switchboard, NRDC's part of their website, and he had a wonderful, I don't know how many of you are counting, but a Saturday before last, I think, the Clean Water Act celebrated its 42nd birthday, and so he wrote about that in a wonderful way. But he also pointed out that growing up and being in the Boston area, he was reminded not to come anywhere close to the Charles River, which was badly polluted at the time. So common stories of very wonderful people, Jon and Senator Mitchell. So we were particularly interested in his work because, among other things, he leads a report that's been coming out for over 20 years at NRDC called Testing the Waters, which takes EPA data and kind of looks at it in a variety of ways to really get a handle on whether we're making progress or not in dealing with the kind of coastal pollution problems that ultimately are coming off the land. So he's here to talk about that and to help us think about how we do the work we're doing so that we can make more progress in linking knowledge with action. Jon, thanks for being here.
Thanks a bunch, David, and thank you all for very much for inviting me here and for the opportunity to be back in Maine even for a day. As David said, I'm Jon Devine. I'm with the Natural Resources Defense Council. I focus on U.S. clean water policy. I can't quite believe it, but I've been involved in this for about 20 years now. As David said, I was inspired to take up this line of work after a summer job studying netting, getting pooped on by savanna sparrows on Kent Island up in the Bay of Fundy. And subsequently had a chance to work on clean air issues at the Maine Department of Environmental Protection and after law school at the Environmental Protection Agency. I've been at NRDC since 2001, and I couldn't be happier with where I am. It's a great place to work and be. But I suspect that that is not that my main background, such as it is, oh no, my picture isn't there, there it is, and being an old hand environmentalist is not really why I got to be here today. I'm confident that's because NRDC has been working on issues that are close to your hearts for a long time, and that I am the current steward of NRDC's 25-year effort looking at beach water quality and the policies, solutions needed to identify contamination problems, communicate the risks to the public, and to clean up beaches. Our Testing the Waters report has presented monitoring data collected by state and local beach management officials and public health officials, as well as information about closings and swimming advisories, and the practices that leaders need to use to find, to solve problems and communicate with beachgoers. The focus of our report is the 30 coastal and Great Lakes states. For historical reasons, that's because of federal legislation called the Beach Act, which provides funding to coastal, and coastal is defined as including the Great Lakes, states to do notification, to monitor their beaches, water quality, and communicate the risks to the public. First, a word on what we're concerned about when we look at water quality. I apologize if this is way too basic for you folks. We reliably get questions every year when we do our report about what the best beach is, or get criticized for saying that A beach has low contamination rates when the people who go there know that there are litter problems or other reasons that the beach might not be particularly desirable to visit. Our focus is very specific. It's not on visitors' overall beach experience. We don't care about how well equipped the bathrooms are. We focus on specific question: are there pathogens in the water that can make people sick? These bacteria, viruses, protozoa, other things are of concern because they cause gastrointestinal illness, but also a wide range of things up to and including hepatitis and other really nasty stuff you don't want to get. And they're often carried to beaches by runoff from other parts of the watershed. As I'll get to in a few minutes, that's why a number of our policy prescriptions focus on reducing polluted runoff. This slide is a slight diversion. It focuses on harmful algal blooms, a term that I'm sure you know is used to describe outbreaks of cyanobacteria that can produce toxins that can cause a variety of effects in people and in animals. I wanted to include it, though, even though it's not the focus of most places' beach monitoring programs and necessarily, therefore, not our report, because it poses another potential concern to beachgoers because of many of the sources of this pollution are the same as cause the pathogen exposure that we're concerned with, and because a major harmful algal bloom was recently in the news, with Toledo's drinking water utility having to tell its customers not to bathe in or drink from the public water supply for a couple of days, nearly 500,000 people, because of an algae bloom that got into the intake. So where do these bacteria, viruses, and other nasty critters come from? It obviously depends on the individual beach. That's the first thing I almost invariably say when talking to someone about what's the cause of pollution at my beach. That depends. I mean, that's not just a lawyer's answer. That really matters. And the concentration also matters. The geography of a particular beach can really influence how bad the contamination can be. But taking a step back to generalize a bit, the sources listed here are the ones that beach officials most commonly point to when they can identify a culprit. In particular, stormwater is the most prevalent known cause of beach closings and swimming advisories when we've compiled the state-reported statistics. The actual leading category is unknown. That's what states usually report. But when they know of a source, this is what they say. And because it's such a frequently cited problem, stormwater warrants some serious discussion here. I suspect that most people don't think of rain and snow as a pollution source. And as we'll talk in a minute, they don't need to be. I certainly never thought of it before I started in water policy as a problem. But when precipitation flows over impervious areas, it picks up all the crud between it and the water it goes to. It carries all manner of pollution into storm sewers, like these in my neighborhood in Arlington, Virginia, from which it is discharged into waterways almost invariably without treatment. In addition, rainfall and other stormwater contributes to pathogen pollution in more than 700 communities around the country that have combined sewer systems, ones that carry both domestic sewage from people's homes and businesses, and stormwater from impervious surfaces around the watershed in the same pipes. During dry weather and small precipitation events, these systems send the combined flows to the sewage treatment plant, and that's good. It gets treatment there. But in heavier storms and in many places, because development has grown so much, it doesn't take much more than a little storm. These systems are designed to overflow to prevent overloading the sewage treatment system at the end of the line. So at various points along the distribution system, or the collection system, pardon me, they dump into area waterways a combination of raw sewage and stormwater. Sanitary sewers, which are dedicated sewers that carry just waste from homes and businesses and other things, also often cause problems themselves. Those systems are in many places very old, they leak, and they can get in, the resultant overflow can get into stormwater, can get into groundwater, can reach beaches that way. And we have nowhere near kept pace with the investment needed to keep those systems running as designed. Sanitary sewer leaks are actually unlawful under the Clean Water Act, and the Act also requires that communities with combined sewer systems, like 30 or so here in Maine, develop long-term control plans that are designed to significantly reduce or eliminate those overflows. And as you can see from the lines at the bottom, Maine has made some progress in that regard. We're still having a significant number of overflows, and some communities even had to close their shellfish areas last year. But over time, the investment in controlling these sources of pollution is important to get these pathogens that under control. Another source of the bacteria and viruses that we see at our beaches, as David alluded to, is industrial livestock production. Large animal factories are poorly controlled under existing rules, which allow animal waste to be spread on fields with no controls aimed at limiting the pathogen release. Individual beaches have reported, as we've collected these anecdotes over time, that the pathogens in their water are attributable to wildlife. And we also know, obviously, that pet waste contains these contaminants. So limiting this pollution on a beach-by-beach basis can involve adopting management practices that are targeted to those, like requiring people to pick up after their pets, or driving off wildlife. One of the examples in our report over a couple of years is a Chicago area beach that uses border collies to chase off birds that congregate on the beach, because their poop was the largest source of the pathogens in the water. Given the multitude of pollution sources and the different variables that go into whether a particular beach is contaminated, there are numerous things we think need to be done to reduce people's exposure to pollution at the beach. This list reflects our most recent report's plan of action, the top things that we think ought to be priorities to take on. Surely more will be needed, and like I said, particular solutions at particular beaches may well be in order. But these we view as no regrets strategies that will improve water quality generally and keep beachgoers informed about the risks to their health. I'll talk about each of these in turn. A couple of our central recommendations amount to simply preserving and installing natural features that prevent stormwater from causing pollution problems, as depicted in this infographic, downloadable at nrdc.org/beaches. These natural solutions provide multiple benefits beyond just water quality, making them frequently a very high value investment. The primary components of this approach are preserving existing natural buffers against pollution and runoff, like wetlands and small streams, while integrating a suite of techniques that we call green infrastructure into urban and suburban stormwater management. Green infrastructure consists of things like green roofs, rain gardens, permeable pavement, things that allow a site that otherwise would create runoff to retain the precipitation that falls on the ground. In addition to controlling stormwater, green infrastructure has a number of positive benefits. It helps reduce air pollution by the use of vegetation that filters out stuff from the air. It reduces urban temperatures, which maybe in Maine is not as much of a concern, but is, the urban heat island is a frequently known effect of climate change and is actually a real public health problem. And it also improves property values. People who have green stuff on their property can rent out properties at higher rates, for instance. The first critical clean water policy we identify is without question the biggest current issue in national water law and regulation. The basic issue is that today there is enormous uncertainty about what kinds of water bodies are protected by the various pollution control programs of the Federal Clean Water Act. This is in part due to a pair of Supreme Court decisions from 2001 and 2006, and was made significantly worse by policy implementation of those decisions by the prior presidential administration. There is no more foundational issue in clean water law as this. Virtually every pollution prevention program in the Act, it applies only to covered waters. And denying certain kinds of waters the protection under the law means that pollution filtering and stormwater capturing wetlands and small streams can be destroyed without protection from that law, or required mitigation when those discharges do occur. In Maine, more than half the streams are considered headwaters. Looking for someone I was talking to earlier who had done some. Oh, there you are. I think talked about some of the research on the GIS work, but sorry. And it's probably higher than that, I bet, if you actually were mapping it accurately. About 13% of the streams don't flow year-round in Maine. Those are the kinds of resources that are most vulnerable to loss of protection under the law as it's developed. They also have multiple benefits beyond just their water quality. Sort of straight up water quality. They help supply drinking water nationwide. These headwater streams and intermittent and ephemeral streams help supply drinking water for 117 million Americans, over 450,000 people in Maine. So fortunately, after many years of fighting over what ought to be protected, the Obama administration has proposed a rule which is currently out for public comment, and which is well within the bounds of the law as laid out by the Supreme Court and the science as it's been developed about how important these resources are, that will better protect many of these resources. It is as important an issue as I can imagine, and certainly the most important thing that we've seen on the national front in 15 years. The next most critical policy initiative we feel we need to advance is to significantly improve the requirements applicable to sources of polluted runoff. EPA has substantial authority under the law to establish performance requirements for stormwater sources to improve water quality. And the agency had long promised to use that authority to require at least new sites and redeveloped sites to achieve retention performance targets, something like the 85th percentile storm retained on site, for instance. And the agency was also considering requiring site owners of significant impervious cover to reduce or increase their retention, we think that kind of national performance standard could significantly help municipalities who today under the law are responsible for the vast majority of stormwater control. Cities and towns are required to have permits under the Clean Water Act that are supposed to mitigate their impact on streams, and virtually all areas that are even slightly urbanized have water quality problems, such that those municipalities are facing real challenges. We think that by requiring development, especially on the private side, to control their contribution to the stormwater problem, that will help municipalities meet their own goals. Unfortunately, EPA abandoned the rulemaking it had long promised earlier this year, even though the agency continues to acknowledge that stormwater is a critical problem and green infrastructure is among the best ways to promote it. In our view, EPA needs to reinvigorate this effort. It is imperative that there be a national baseline of control on this well-recognized source of pollution. The agency already has a very robust record to develop this rule. It gathered information for high on 3-4 years to get ready to. But I'm afraid we've seen virtually no interest in re-engaging. I think that's likely due to a fear of political blowback, which we've seen in spades on the prior rulemaking that I just mentioned. In the meantime, though, EPA and state officials need at least to vigorously enforce the rules on the books, so that permits for discharging municipalities are strong and drive significant retention on site. In addition, though, EPA has rejected attempts by NRDC along with the Conservation Law Foundation and American Rivers to urge the agency to use its so-called residual designation authority, which would require pollution control permits from stormwater sources that contribute to pollution problems. The agency should also reevaluate that approach. If permits for significant stormwater sources, privately owned, are in place, it would ensure that private parties that are contributing to the stormwater problem, like strip malls, big parking lots, and things like that, share in the responsibility of addressing runoff pollution with municipalities. I think, as some of us were discussing earlier today, I think that is a particular place where you folks could play a really great role in Maine, is in whether there are opportunities to bring together particular municipalities where they might be open to partnering in this kind of way with NGOs and with state officials about how to best control pollution that they're on the hook to manage, but either don't generate fully themselves and may not even have full authority to control from private sites. A third element of our plan of action is, in my view, a no-brainer. We should not weaken, as the sewage treatment industry has pressed Congress to do, Clean Water Act requirements that ensure that sewage gets basic treatment and that facilities regularly update their controls as needed to meet water quality goals set by the states. I do think, however, that part of that demand is that water quality advocates like me need to pair our insistence on rigorous compliance with the law with support for industry's advocacy for greater and more sustained funding. These investments improve public health by taking nasty stuff out of the water before we go to the beach, and they create good jobs. This is investment in infrastructure is a huge potential economic engine that we have gotten too far away from, at least on the water side. While we work to get the sources of pollution under control, we also need to improve the ways that we detect and communicate about pathogen risks to swimmers. NRDC has long advocated for improvements to the Federal Beach Act to authorize enhanced funding for state programs and research on rapid detection methods so that levels of pathogens that are of concern can be identified within hours rather than a day after the contamination is high, which is the present practice in most places. And we've also advocated for authority and financing to go and help clean up sources of pollution. Unfortunately, that legislation, long championed by late Senator Frank Lautenberg, has not moved in the currently divided Congress. Perhaps worse, EPA has fallen down on the job of implementing the current Beach Act. It was required by the Act to update safe-to-swim standards a couple of years ago, and when it did so, it blessed as sufficiently protective a standard that was clearly not. At the same time, however, this is the allowing, if people were to swim in water just meeting the so-called safe-to-swim standard, EPA's own data indicated that that would pose a illness risk of 36 in 1,000. At the same time it developed this weaker standard, however, it developed a more cautionary value for making swimming-related decisions. It called it the beach action value, and the use of which EPA has subsequently established as a condition for states receiving Beach Act funding to do notification and monitoring programs. We believe that this more protective benchmark should be adopted broadly by states, and so we hope that this financial incentive will encourage states to do so. And again, that initiative seems like something that your collection of folks can really help see through, both on the public policy side, but also on the public health side, why this is a good decision to make. I want to highlight just a couple of images from the Maine chapter of our Testing the Waters report. I guess technically it's not a chapter, it's really just a web page these days, but I'm old-fashioned. This one depicts how the samples taken at beaches for which Maine reported monitoring information to EPA compared against the more precautionary beach action value. As you can see in the red and maybe goldenrod up top, slivers, there appears still to be work to do. 31 beaches had more than 10% of their samples in 2013 exceed the beach action value. And lest you think that these results are only due to our use of the beach action value, which we did for the first time in our report last year, or this past summer, this chart shows in blue how the state's beaches have performed using the old, less protective standard. And as you can see, it is water quality across the state's beaches has not improved over a 5-year period. I point to these figures not to place blame. In fact, one of the things I've learned in working on this report over several years is how dedicated the state and local beach and public health officials are to their beaches. And it is one of the pure delights of my job to get to talk to people and to, on the day we release it, a lot of media who want to talk a lot about the particular beach in their neck of the woods and how great it is. It is a real sense of ownership, and I appreciate that. As I hope this presentation indicates, we believe a number of policy solutions are needed, and many of them are federal in nature, in order to provide beach managers with the tools and the safeguards they need to support their work. One example of how this commitment to national support for state and local clean water policies has played out in the beach arena is the last element of our plan of action, which is maintaining funding for state beach programs. In the past several years, the Obama administration has inexplicably proposed to zero out federal funding for state Beach Act programs. Their rationale is lame. They say states know how to monitor their beaches and notify people of the risks. Well, sure they do, but they don't have the money to pay people to do that if the federal money isn't there. In fact, many states, I believe Maine is one, rely entirely on federal support to maintain their programs. So that's why Clean Water Advocates have partnered with state officials in part in pushing back against this short-sighted idea. And we've succeeded in the last 3 fiscal years together. I hope very much we don't have to fight it again, but that's the kind of thing that I think demonstrates our commitment to helping clean up the nation's beaches and using smarter policies in partnership between the national and the local. And that is the end of my presentation.
Plenty of time for questions, and I know that there are folks from other institutions that are also listening. So let's start in this room, and then we'll work our way around to some of the other places too.
To what extent do sampling strategies, I don't know, like skew or perhaps distort the data that's involved in the report? Like, is that potentially an issue?
There are ways that the physical way you take a sample can lead to differences in the data, even down to the depth. As I understand it, I'm a lawyer, remember, so full disclaimer. Sort of higher up in the water column is potentially more contaminated. But also if you're sampling near stormwater outfall, because as I talked about, stormwater is one of the big sources of this pollution. That can have an effect. But those are good practices that we try to encourage, because people swim on days after a rainfall. They swim near these outfalls because people don't know what the sources of pollution are. Sometimes they don't even know after they've gotten sick why they got sick. They don't associate it with swimming. The answer is yes, but we try to encourage folks to use the most precautionary approach as possible. There is some guidance from the feds as well about kind of protocols.
You mentioned that Maine still has work to do. I was wondering if you could point to any other states that you think have been successful, for example, or some states we might look to as models to learn from?
I hope so, and I hope soon. We're working on the next phase of this project. We've already started for next year. Because it'll be our 25th year of the report, we're actually trying to pull together sort of how have places responded to these challenges, and where have been some particular successes. In annual reports, we have also done, we've mentioned whenever we can find individual case studies of people using, in particular, the kinds of policy innovations that we are most stressing, green infrastructure, to improve their water quality. And so if you go to nrdc.org/beaches, you can see that there are some of the past reports are linked from there, and each state has its own chapter, and we usually report without much editing what folks tell us about where they've had successes.
So I was wondering, sometimes when you see reports of pollution problems from sewage plants, you might go to talk to the local management district, and they would say, well, they'll demonstrate or they'll show you all the infrastructure that they've done, their operations that they have, and they're very elaborate and they're trying really hard, but because of the inherent problems with random accidents, for instance, the loading still occur no matter what. And I was wondering how that played into the legal process of if there's a bacteria problem, is there a portion of it may not be resolvable if there's a high density of people there. And what are the legal tools what's the philosophy of dealing with that?
Sure. So there are a couple of thoughts about that. First, to me, the most important thing is, yes, there's going to be contamination at beaches, and some of it is going to happen because of wildlife or other things as well. Truly unavoidable stuff. There is no reason not to communicate that to the public. And so the more you can notify people of the conditions as they exist and warn people about the risks to them, that empowers them to make decisions. On the solution side, depending on the nature of the source of the pollution, there could be legal remedies. Sewage treatment plants are supposed to discharge only in accordance with state water quality standards, which are supposed to be set at a level to protect public health. And so if that's not achieved, then they will need to upgrade their infrastructure.
You mentioned, adding on to what you just said, you mentioned primary and secondary systems for controlling wastewater. State of Maine doesn't have a tertiary requirement?
Is that a question or?
Yeah.
I don't know. The basic federal requirement is secondary treatment, which, as defined in EPA's rules, apply to pH total suspended solids and biochemical oxygen demand, and that's it, and haven't been updated since the early 80s. Individual states can require more of their dischargers. That's the way the Clean Water Act works. And if they're discharging into water bodies that are already not meeting requirements for particular pollutants, so if they're hypoxic or something that you need to limit nutrient discharges, then that is supposed to be worked into their permitting process, which is supposed to happen every 5 years. In practice, it probably happens every 7 to 10.
And we get a lot of these companies saying that they don't have money to upgrade and they don't have, I guess, the insurance to, go along.
Pollution control is not always cheap. It's true. In an industry, if you will, that is largely municipal, like the sewage treatment industry, I do think that we have a responsibility as a nation to invest in making sure that they are able to meet their requirements, and that means that there ought to be really significant investment in the federal Clean Water Revolving Fund, which provides grants to states that then loan out to communities to do these construction projects at publicly owned treatment works.
Has there been any exploration into state incentives to do that kind of stuff? Has there been anybody exploring what incentives work for states to participate in that? And are there any federal incentives?
Well, like I said, there is a federal, the revolving fund program. It has not been very well funded in recent years. It is the degree of federal investment in clean water infrastructure, in stormwater infrastructure, in drinking water infrastructure lags tremendously in comparison to the needs that have been identified, which combined is near $1 trillion. So it is a sad truth that we are not investing in this infrastructure. I think it's largely because it's not nearly as visible as some of our other public infrastructure, roads and bridges and the like. But I think that is the starting point is upping that. Some folks have suggested that what we really need is like they have in transportation, a trust fund that is basically created out of at the federal level and can't be touched for other reasons in the budget process.
I know, I just want to add that I know, with wind power in Maine under Burke, these agencies or these companies that were coming in and installing wind power had to put a certain amount of money away in the trust funds in order to dismantle those wind power structures within 20 years when they're no longer functioning because it costs millions of dollars to dismantle them. And so I don't see why something similar cannot be implemented for some of these industries and some of these other sources of pollution.
Let me just for a second see if there's any folks either at the University of New Hampshire or anywhere else. If you have a question there, your mics are unmuted. If you want to raise your hand and let us know. Do you at UNH?
Yeah, I have questions. I'm really interested in your talk about natural solution and buffer zone to solve the problem, but many people they just think they didn't see the indirect value of this infrastructure because if you set some buffer zone, those land cannot be developed for agriculture or other land use. And some people think we are waste money to, because those areas maybe have some other economic values. And I think it's a big challenge for us to management our land. So do you think how can we solve the situation? Yeah.
I think that's a great question. There's no doubt that using green infrastructure in urban and suburban environments means using some land often. Sometimes you can do it on the rooftop, which is great. But using some land to mitigate your stormwater. The good news is that many of these things are can be done as as just an alternative to the other way you would develop a property. You could have a permeable pavement for your driveway, for instance. You can, and many of these things are just simply amenities. You know, it just is a different way. We just need to get used to thinking of them rather than having a huge lawn, having a little bit of it be a rain garden that receives the vast majority of the runoff from your property. That probably won't satisfy the economists who will insist that we value the opportunity cost of not developing that particular slice of the land, and I think that has actually been part of the problem in moving forward on regulations at the national level is really quantifying the potential benefits versus the costs. But I think especially in situations where you're newly developing a piece of property or redeveloping it, where you're making a significant investment in a property as well, dedicating a very small portion of that cost to offsetting the cost that you would otherwise be imposing on municipalities and your neighbors by virtue of their property taxes down the line is a smart policy.
I'm going to do one more question. I think I see Carrie Kaiser, who I think you already know Jon, but Carrie is at Maine Healthy Beaches, leads the program, and was a key source of many of the ideas we got when we wrote this proposal. So, Carrie,
of course.
take it away.
Hi, Jon. Sorry I patched in late, but I liked a lot of what you said, especially investment in infrastructure. That's definitely what we need more of in Maine. And there's no question that our water quality is getting worse over time, especially if you look at the amount of rainfall that falls within that
Sure.
monitoring season. But a couple of questions for you, and I'll try to keep it succinct because of time, but we too were very disappointed in what was ruled out from the EPA. We were hoping for more real-time tools and better science behind this program. Relying on fecal indicator bacteria is very antiquated, and primarily in Maine we're concerned about regrowth issues, naturalized bacteria, and wildlife. We're absolutely concerned about human sources, but we rarely trust the numbers that we're getting, even with the 104 number. Because through sanitary surveys and other investigative efforts, we know there's very little to no human impact in those areas. So dropping the safety threshold through the BAV policy decision didn't seem like a good direction to go in every case. Maybe our high-risk beaches, but maybe not for the ones that have significant wildlife and water systems adjacent to them. So my question is, do you see any movement at the federal level to move to monitoring viruses resources and tools to really do a good job.
Thank you, Carrie. Nice to meet you finally in person. So I don't expect much movement on rapid testing on different general approaches to testing from EPA. It just doesn't seem like that's in the cards very soon. I mean, if anything, they seem to be getting out of the Beach Act game as much as they possibly can. Which is, I guess, why I would not. I don't think it's the right answer not to use the more protective beach action value as a tool for identifying and communicating risks to the public. It is unquestionably the case, as you know better than I, that some beaches are contaminated by things other than human sources. But that doesn't, to me, indicate a need not to tell people what's in the water and what the risks are. And if this is what the public health agency's best advice to us about identifying risks is, that's why we think it ought to be used as the basis for identifying which beaches have concerns.
Thank you, and that sort of segues to my next question, is for the 2013 Taking the Waters report, NRDC used these more conservative beach action value to report the data. However, no states have adopted those beach action values. Can you explain why that was the chosen method, if no states are using those BAVs?
Because they are the best, in our view, they were the best indicator of what the safe to swim standard ought to be. EPA had eliminated the prior standard. We had there was no federal 104 level anymore, to use the right number. And as you say, states were in the process of deciding what to do next. But we thought that the science supported the most stringent standard possible. We reflected that in as many ways we possibly could in our communication about the report. This is what we used. This is how beaches stacked up using the old number, in case you were interested, and so that gave folks a way of seeing what kind of performance the beaches were seeing under both standards, and a benchmark for considering how they were doing as compared to EPA, what EPA identified as the most health protective benchmark for ascertaining how beaches were doing.
So I think at that point, I can tell there's probably more questions here, and I encourage you to hang around, and in Carrie, in case maybe I can connect you guys in other ways. But I want to thank everybody, and particularly thank Jon for being here today.
Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure.